Very good afternoon to everyone. Just thrilled to be having this very exciting panel discussion with a very, very eminent panel. In a moment, I'll quickly introduce the panel members and then we'll get started. So my name is Saurabh Singh. I'm a partner with Kearney and I lead our energy practice for APAC in India. I am joined by a very distinguished panel. Let me just start with the introductions. So we have Sangeet Jain, he's the country head for LanzaTech. We have Dr. Stephen Bull. He's Executive Vice President Renewables for Eka Solutions. We have Mr. Ayush Gupta. He's Director HR for GAIL. And last but not the least, we have Sajeev Nath. He's the Chief Executive for Yokogawa, India, Middle East and Africa, and the MD for Yokogawa for India and the neighboring countries. As we get started, let me just set the stage for this very interesting topic, which is efficiency at the heart of growth, technology, innovation, digitalization, and talent. I think there is absolutely no doubt in our minds that the energy sector, the part of the sector that all of us in this room are part of, is headed for a massive transformation. And as we look at this transformation, there's a lot of talk around, how will this transition pan out, by when will certain technologies evolve, and so on. But a very important aspect of it are the enablers, the things that are really going to make it happen. And there are, the four pillars, as I call them. There is technology, digital, innovation, and talent. Without these, all the ambitious goals and targets that we have set for ourselves, that you've heard speakers in the previous panels talk about, will be meaningless. And hence, having a detailed discussion about it is important. And who better to have with is a set of practitioners. And therefore, the idea of this session would be to talk about it in real terms. Talk about what each of these gentlemen who have been at the forefront of driving some of these have been doing in their respective organizations, and trying to make it a bit real in terms of actual examples and things that they've been doing on the ground. So without further ado, let me start with Sajeev. Sajeev, you've been at the forefront of driving digital and innovation for many years, both on the conventional side and now on the emerging energy side as well. So could you just walk us through your journey and what is it that you've been focusing on lately?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Saurabh, because if you see the technologies, it's been evolving. But what is important, I would feel, is to link the core values of sustainability to the digital transformation that one is doing. So if you really look at it, at the heart of the digital transformation, you have to look at the societal goals in particular to improve the society. I think that's where we are focused on, because we as a company, we are focused on three core aspects. One is reduce emissions to net zero by 2050 or 2070. The second part is to actually look at well-being for all. And the third part is to transition to a circular economy. And I think digitalization actually accelerates that change. Pre-COVID and post-COVID, there's a fundamental difference. Pre-COVID, digitalization was not adapted at a level, but the moment COVID struck the society, we had to find our own ways of doing business. We also had to look at the society in general. So just as a categorical example, one of the largest refiners of India actually wanted to do an FAT using remote engineering and remote FAT. Would that have been possible pre-COVID era? That's a question mark. But post-COVID, that's a possibility. You don't have to travel across the world. You actually get your act together. You actually translate that into values. I think these three core aspects, when driven by digital transformation, will actually accelerate the change. And I think change is happening in a very big manner. We have to embrace that change. We have to embrace technology, and that leads to the growth and efficiency, and digital transformation is at the heart of it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Sajeev. Great opening remarks. And let me now move to Stephen, who actually has a lot of experience in an area that has generated a lot of interest lately. And I'm talking about offshore wind here, which has tremendous potential in India. I mean, honestly, with the 7,500 plus kilometers of coastline that we have, I think the potential is huge. And Stephen, how do you see that evolve in India? And I think it'll be good for you to demystify that for this group here. The specific question that I want to pose to you is, do you really think the floating offshore wind in deep water is the next wave? Is it really real?
Thanks, Saurabh. I think the development of offshore wind has been a huge phenomenon we've seen for many years. The first wind farm was actually in 1992 in Denmark. It was essentially just slightly offshore. It was an onshore wind turbine, and over the time we've seen to go from a tiny, small kilowatt turbine to the megawatts that we have today. And in about 2030, we're looking at about 380 gigawatts of global offshore wind. And whilst this is still a lot of work going on within Europe and the US, we see that South Korea, Vietnam, Brazil, and especially India are showing strong ambitions here for growth of offshore wind. I think what's interesting as well is that the deployment has been the key aspect here. So that's what's driven down the costs. What has been a fairly expensive technology in the past. And now you can see it actually is outcompeting even onshore wind in some auctions in the UK, but also lower prices than gas as well. And just a few facts to get into ahead a bit as well, is that the largest offshore wind turbine today, which is made by Vestas, is 15 megawatts. And just actually the rotor diameter is 236 meters. And the swept area, which is obviously taking all the energy within this, is actually 44,000 square meters. So it's, 1 turn of that turbine can actually power a UK household for one day, just one single turn. So the scale of this business has been huge, and we see that the Chinese manufacturers are also growing massively as well. China now actually has just overtaken the UK as the largest offshore wind market in the world. So just a bit, further when it comes to floating offshore wind, wherever you think now you have shallow waters up to about 50, 60 meters, that's perfect for a normal offshore wind development. You can put in different jackets, or you can put in monopile foundations. But when you start to get into deeper water, then obviously you can't actually take those normal foundations in there. The water's too deep, and you need too much steel. So floating foundations is definitely the next wave. And we've seen this already we've seen it in Norway, we've seen it in the UK, France, many other countries, Portugal, Spain, growth of essentially deep water offshore wind. What's exciting about it is actually you're taking an oil and gas technology, which, for example, it could be a SPA type technology or a semi-submersible, and you're adding basically renewables on top of it, and you're just scaling this up. So it's you're actually using technical integrity from the oil and gas industry, but putting it into a renewables context. And what's important about this one is it means that now wherever you have a coastline, whether it's deep water, shallow water, then you have an opportunity for offshore wind. And that complementary part of offshore wind to solar, energy storage, to natural gas as well, is something that we've missed in a lot of countries. And I think that's going to play a strong role, I think, in the future for India too.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I think it's extremely insightful. The fact that a lot of technologies which have been developed for the oil and gas space, which have been extensively used by it, are now getting deployed for renewable energy solutions. And that's wonderful to hear. From one promising technology to another, I'm moving to Sangeet from LanzaTech, and let me first start by congratulating you about the new. In fact, even as we speak, there is a parallel event happening where there is a signing going on, and I'm going to ask Sangeet to talk about it a bit more on what is it all about. And at the same time, I also want him to detail out a bit more about the bioenergy revolution that could potentially happen. And Sangeet and his firm have been at the forefront of it, so it'll be good to hear from you. What is the full potential of it? Because in my mind, we are just barely scratching the surface right now. So could you just tell us more? You need to come through.
So the first thing that you asked, what's happening in the room next door? LanzaTech also has a company which is into sustainable aviation fuel, LanzaJet, and right now we are signing a MOU with Indian Oil for putting up a sustainable aviation fuel unit at Panipat. And the technology that we will be using is converting ethanol into sustainable aviation fuel. And the way LanzaTech has been looking at the technologies is how we can use the power of biology to use whatever carbon is above the ground, and our needs are more in terms of molecules which contain carbon, hydrogen, and if they are available above the ground, can we harness the power of biology and make the products that we need? And so we developed a process, gas fermentation, which is able to utilize the waste residues from the industry, the industrial waste, the solid waste, which can be converted into molecules like carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, hydrogen. So what we see today is there is a push with the renewable energy happening, with a lot of push on getting hydrogen. And so what it brings is a low cost, a renewable hydrogen, a renewable, and in all the activities that we do, there is generation of carbon dioxide. So we use a hydrocarbon and we convert it into carbon dioxide at some stage. And we have a process that can convert the carbon dioxide back into a hydrocarbon. So that is what we have been looking at. And we also see a lot of other people working in the area. So one success leads to another. That is what we think. And the thing that we have been looking is how we can deploy the technology quickly. There are challenges, and like you said, we are barely scratching the surface. There's a huge amount of carbon available. There's a huge amount of renewable power that is coming up, and these can be the combinations to provide the products that will be needed both for our mobility needs and our other chemical needs.
Thank you, and this is super exciting. You know, the fact that we are using waste industrial gases and so on to make aviation fuel, it is very, very exciting. I think it bodes for great times for India in the days to come. Shifting gears, let me move to Ayush, and let me start with a bit of a provocation. There's a lot of talk around technology, digital innovation that keeps happening in the context of energy transition. But somehow the conversation around talent sometimes remains a bit understated. And at least in my mind, I mean, you've been nurturing some of India's finest talent at a Maharatna company for many, many years now. So first, I want to get a sense from you, how critical is that? And what role do you think talent can play in helping drive efficiency and help the process of energy transition?
Thank you, sir. One thing is very clear, and as you rightly stated, that we talk about driving all this technology, innovation, and digitalization. It is to be carried forward by the employees or the human beings for which it is being meant. So we talk about lot about talent development, talent transition, but many a times a little focus takes a back seat when we talk of talent attraction, retention, as well as development. So it's critical for any organization, just like GAIL, any other organization in the world will be facing similar kind of challenges, particularly in terms of how do we transition talent. We talk of technology transition, but also the organization needs talent transition also, from moving from a earlier set of technology where they were more comfortable to work with new set of technologies or digitalization and be comfortable with. They have to be comfortable using it. Unless the people who are using it are comfortable, the growth and efficiency is not about to come. And why it is more critical is in the current context, and which I can make sense from all the fellow speakers who have spoken just before me, and with the display of all the technology in this exhibition, that the rate with which the technology, innovation, and digitalization is coming is much, much faster than the rate of talent development. So that makes it more critical that if we have to adopt these technologies, talent has to come first before the technology. But what is happening? Technology is coming first, and then we are trying to prepare our people to adopt to that technology. So that makes it critical, and that's why we at the industry feel that there are critical gaps when the people are coming and joining. They are not ready to deliver from day one. And in the era of 2 minutes Maggi noodle where we want instant results, we need instant talent to be available to work on those technologies and things which are available. So that I believe is the core when we talk of making effective use of this technology, digitalization, and innovation in driving growth, and efficiency in the organization, that talent has to come in sync with the changes which are happening in the technological space. And that should remain a focus, and we'll have to preempt the talent development activities. Possibly the industry and the academia will have to work more closely, and the students or the younger generation coming up in joining these organizations need to be in sync with those changes. But yet another sector which remains unfocused, or lot money focus is not there, because 70% of the organization will have people who have been there in the organization for 10 to 15 years. How do we transition them to use that technology? The younger generation will be more comfortable with the use of that technology or new things. But the existing population, how do we take care of them to be more comfortable in using the technology will be something critical, all the more critical for all of us across the industry.
Absolutely. And if I'm not mistaken, GAIL, I think, has an average age of its employees is around 40 odd years,
42 years to be precise.
42 years. And you're progressively getting younger, if I'm not mistaken, as we get in more and more people, and attracting them, making sure that they are retained and they are interested in doing this, and developing and reskilling them is going to be extremely important. Though I must say, as an observation, that energy transition in a way is also serving as a bit of a magnet for new young talent. Because if you were to look at it, a few years ago, there were some schools of thought who thought the oil and gas industry was not the cleanest industry to go into, and quote unquote old and boring as compared to some of the relatively more fancied sectors that were coming up. But now there is a huge sense of purpose that has come in to the new talent that is graduating out of colleges right now, and there is a renewed desire for them to work in a lot of the energy related ventures, and therefore I think these are very, very exciting times from a talent standpoint for us.
That is increasing the challenge for the industry people, because what we call as a war for talent is there to get the best of the people in your organization to drive these changes.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, on that note, there's a related point. Maybe Sanjeev, you'll be best placed to answer that. There is a specific nuance in the energy side, which is what we call the IT-OT convergence. And what we really need there are multilinguals, people who are able to speak both those languages, and there is a specific kind of skill set which is needed there. Now, finding that expertise and making sure that it sticks into organizations is difficult. What's your take on it? I mean, how easy or difficult is it that you're finding on the ground right now?
I think that's going to be a very tough challenge, because when you talk about convergence of OT and IT, the challenge that we see is that on the OT space, you have a lot of people who talk the operational technology language, as well as who develop the applications which enable the oil and gas plants, the chemical plants, all to run smoothly. That's the process knowledge. But the moment you transfer that into an IT sort of a jargon, you have the programming which comes into it. The linkage between the operational technology and the IT technology, there's a vacuum of talent, because people who can speak both these languages are far less in our country. And that is where I think the Indian universities will need to gear up, because the future of energy, it's not only on the energy platform, across all industries in general, you are seeing that convergence happening. These were different faculties at one period of time. We see a sandwich course happening, but it's also the responsibility of end users, vendors, as well as process licensors, all to come together to actually create a new curriculum which can take India into the next millennium. Because the whole point is, if you are at the core of any transformation, you need to have competent people. And people do make a difference. As our Honorable Prime Minister says, it's the society which makes the difference. For any technology to be adopted on a mass level scale, you need to have the right people to run it. And that's the dearth of talent that we are seeing at this period point of time. The second part is, the average population of India is around the 30 years group of people, right? There's a young talent out there, people who want to do a lot of new things, a lot of intellects out there, a lot of entrepreneurs out there. But at the same time, there are existing people who are about to go in for retirement. They also need to be upskilled, because the whole point is we need to transform the society in large. Transformation is only possible through knowledge. And I think as responsible businesses or responsible corporations, it's our duty to actually transform the society in large. Education for all, but quality education for all is the mantra that I would suggest. Because going forward, if we have to transform at the pace that we are transforming, the right people at the right place with the right competent knowledge is a must. Thank you.
Got it. And how is your organization addressing this right now? Because it's a huge gap and you are right in the middle of it.
I
Any
think
example?
we want to catch them young. So what we do is we try to go out to the colleges and create new courses, or at least have workshops where this synergy of IT and OT can happen. The graduate engineer trainees that who come to an organization, we actually move them through a couple of departments so that they understand digitalization as a process, they understand the operational technology as a point of view. I think it's also an opportunity for end users and vendors like us to actually partner to have what I call as a synergy of movement across. So for example, if GAIL wants to send their people to us and we want to send our people to GAIL, that's the sort of energy experience, because here it's not about a public sector or a private sector, right? It's about knowledge for the society. And if we can come to that goal on a long-term basis, I believe the social transformation can actually help accelerate the goals of India by at least a factor of 2.
Absolutely. I would completely agree. And if I may speak from personal experience, I've been in the middle of a very large digital transformation in India in the oil and gas space. And I can tell you the fact that, it is important to understand that digital is not just dedicated to one particular silo in the organization who's supposed to do it. The idea of having greater digital literacy across the organization, having people get involved, and I think some of the new low-code, no-code platforms, some of the new innovations that are happening are making it easier even for the non-technocrats to really start building that muscle, start appreciating things. And I personally think that could be a game changer for us going forward. Just staying on the topic of talent, because I personally think this discussion is very exciting. Ayush, if I may ask you to do some crystal ball gazing for a couple of minutes and tell us what would an organization of the future look like? What would talent of the future look like? Given the role that you have as Director HR, I'm sure you have to think not 2 years out, but maybe 20 years out as well. How would things change in your organization or beyond? Will be good to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, sir. Let me just, when you say crystal ball gazing, and I think the most recent things, if we talk of technology and innovation and how it's affecting our day-to-day work, is the ChatGPT, which we have talked about. And I just thought of in the morning while driving from the hotel to the venue, let me ask this very question to the ChatGPT and what answer it gives, and whether it is able to cover all the aspects or not. And I got an answer in less than 1 second. And let me just read out the key points so that people can relate whether our thoughts are getting aligned or the AI is able to capture our thoughts in an effective manner. And this will be an example how possibly our work is going to change and how our future workspace is likely to be. And this will also highlight the challenges we are going to face. So I'll just, if you give me a minute, read out. It says the future of organizational and talent management is likely to be shaped by the advances in technology, changing workforce demographics, which is talked about, the evolving business practices, and some of the potential trends would include increased use of AI and automation, emphasis on continuous learning and development, remote working becoming a norm, focus on employee well-being, and diversifying the workforce, and last but not the least, use of data-driven insights in decision-making. So while reading this thing, I was really happy to note, apart from talking about technology and the innovation and the use of data analytics and AI, it included two important aspects touching the human cord. that all this is not possible unless you are able to take care of the well-being of the employees, their development aspects, and as well as diversification. Because the talent which you are going to need 1 year from now, or maybe already you are, the gap is there, that it's altogether different kind of talent you need now. You don't need conventional degrees, people with conventional degrees coming and doing the work. The requirement is all put together going to be different. They need to be tech savvy, they need to be digital savvy, irrespective of their background knowledge. Maybe for R&D jobs or research jobs, you will need specialized courses like that. But for day-to-day working or implementation, you may not need a formal degree there, and people have to be a different kind of a work. So, but going forward, if I have to add my perspective other than what ChatGPT suggested, it is also about how people are going to be comfortable using the machines. It's kind of a, I read some term somewhere, the human robots, rather than just being work being done by robots, it's going to be man-machine interface, which is going to be more important in the times to come. And there it is important that there is no conflict between man and machine. If there are conflicts, if we are not able to adopt those technological changes, people are not able to adapt themselves to them, I think the purpose will get lost. So the critical point here would be in the future times to come, or the workspace, which I feel there may be areas where these conflicts may arise, where people may have apprehensions, they may not be able to adapt. Like he was saying, that we have 30-40% are the youngsters, but there's 50 or 60% of the people who are already there for ages with the company. You can't just tell them to go out. They still have to work. So how comfortable they will be to adapt those technologies. So that may give rise to certain conflicts also in the times to come. How successfully we are able to take care of them or manage such conflicts is one part. But on the brighter side, it's a very exciting times to come, where people are going to be equipped with all the technologies like we have in a palm top with a mobile. So many things are there which can drive your efficiency and the way the work is being done. Just like the ChatGPT, you don't need too many people to tell you what is the discussion point, or you don't need to read so many books to find out an answer. In less than a second, you can get answer to most of your queries. So it's going to be an exciting times to come for everyone of us to experience that. I think that's what my take will be on that.
Thank you, Ayush, and that's very, very interesting. In the spirit of full disclosure, I must tell you that the questions for this panel discussion were not from ChatGPT, at least not for this India Energy Week. But I cannot promise that the next time I'm here, my sense is this technology is going to be a lot more pervasive and probably a little more accurate as well.
The session might be conducted by an AI robot.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have
the speaker, you will get the answer.
So there's a bit of an existential crisis which is brewing in a lot of professions. In fact, I've been asked this question by a few of my clients saying, so do we need a consultant going forward, or will ChatGPT give all the answers? While I'm digressing, I must tell you, ChatGPT can do a lot of things, but driving change on the ground, getting humans to do certain things, is probably the biggest value add that consultants can and should do. And I think that probably will take a little more time. And I think that is something which will continue for some more time. So let us now kind of shift gears and go back to a very interesting point. Stephen, I'm coming to you, which you had brought up in your last response. You had spoken about how there are certain technologies developed for oil and gas, which otherwise people would have overlooked when they were talking about the new renewable energy wave or the overall energy transition. But there is a very real and direct application of that. Could you talk through that a little more? What else is happening? Where else can it be done?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the really popular areas we find, if you're talking about talent and younger people coming into the industry, is around carbon capture and storage, and obviously in CCU as well with the utilization. And we can see more PhDs coming in with more digital solutions. It's really sort of taking off as an exciting area to work within. And I think when it comes to, for example, the future of energy, we see this with India in particular, whereas Europe's looking towards to go straight to electrification, it's almost embarrassed about its oil and gas industry, because the India's, actually it wants to grow its domestic oil and gas industry, its refining, its petrochemicals, but at the same time, biofuels, biogas, methane, renewables, we see hydrogen, green hydrogen. It's such a phenomenon of different areas. I think with the integration of these particular technologies, that's an important aspect, I think, as well, where I think the digitalization and new thinking comes in. When it comes to carbon capture and storage, I think it's worth thinking around this one a lot more, because whilst there's only about 30 plants in the world today with the CCS technology, mostly related to oil and gas, and often this is actually to take off sour gas or to use CO2 for enhanced oil recovery, we see that the next wave coming in with CCS is really driven by industrial use. And those hard to abate sectors like petrochemicals, refining, cement and steel. And there's some really important projects going all over the world. We're actually seeing CO2 capture for this, and where we also see you actually replacing, for example, coal with green hydrogen as well. So again, interaction of these different technologies. When it comes to actually the business model of CCS, I think it's worth reflecting a bit on here, because you can have a stick and you can have a carrot. And at the moment, we have a little bit of both here. And we've had the biggest carrot of all, that's come from the Inflation Reduction Act from the US. And we've seen just in the last year about 45 different CCS projects being slated in the US to be built. There's actually, globally, there's 196 lining up there, and 11 already being commissioned today. So the tax rebates that have been driving CO2 capture is extremely important, because the industry has not been told to do this before, or it's not been incentivized to do this as CO2 as a waste product. And then you have the stick approach, which isn't wrong either. It's just two different policy tools, where in the European Union, where you have the ETS CO2 tax, and in Norway, in particular in offshore Norway, you have a very high CO2 tax for offshore CO2 emissions as well. So that's driving carbon capture and storage. What we can see is that some of the interesting projects we're working on at the moment within Aker Solutions, particularly ones within Europe, are related to CO2 capture of a cement factory. This will be the world's first that will be happening at a major scale. It's Heidelberg Cement, which is the owner. The plant is in Norway, and we're doing the CO2 capture with Aker Carbon Capture, a sister company of ours. And it's about 400,000 tons a day of CO2 capture that will be liquefied and actually shipped out several hundred kilometers to a storage point on the west coast of Norway, and that will be put into a pipeline and stored in the saline aquifer. We're also doing the onshore CO2 storage, and we're doing the offshore work as well. And it's a project called Northern Lights, which the Norwegian government is sponsoring as a major development for the rest of Europe. So at the moment, you see about 1.2 million tons coming from this project, 400,000 from cement, another 400,000 from a waste to energy plant, and another 400,000 coming from a factory actually outside of Norway. It's coming from the Netherlands. It's coming from a fertilizer factory. And the idea of this one is that you can build CO2 capture in the North Sea using either depleted wells or saline reservoirs, and you can start picking from all the major CO2 points in all Europe, whether it comes from Rotterdam, or it comes from the main refineries from near the Netherlands, it comes from the UK, Germany, France, you name it. With a shipping solution, you can actually develop this. And you're going to see this actually market for smaller scale industrial CO2 capture to take off even more. So it's going to be a really important part of the total decarbonisation, particularly for Europe in those hard to abate sectors. And I think this is something, whilst the technology is expensive today, no doubt about it, this will scale again. And the more you scale the CO2 capture side of this, the more you reduce this down. And if you can get this to under 50 tons or 50 euros or dollars per metric ton, then you can actually see this scale up incredibly across the rest of the world. And I think, again, for India to try and think about where we can opportunities to really try and cut out as much carbon as we can as possible, as early as possible, to get it out of the system. I think there's some great technologies that can be really, really scaled in India in the future.
Got it. No, fantastic. And this is so exciting to hear about it. And the point that you made about the differential carrot versus stick approach, I mean, the stick can take you up to a particular distance, but eventually, unless it is commercially viable, unless it starts making sense, that is when the real scale up happens. And in fact, that brings me to the next question, and I'm going to address that to Sangeet. In my mind, for us to make some of these technologies viable, the role of innovation, the role of digital, the role of technology is very, very important. And unless we have those innovations, we don't think some of these will work. So specifically in the area of creating a new value chain, using the abundant waste carbon which is available around us. What else is happening? I mean, what can be done there? What can innovation as a role play in order to make it more viable going forward?